This first chart is old. It's very old, but I wanted to give it to you for two primary purposes. For some of you, it'll go back to knowledge that you had previously to show different internet speeds and how they compared. For instance, how a dial-up connection at the time compared to a cable connection, or different speeds of Ethernet, which is a technology that we use in our internal networks, and Ethernet uses cables. The fun thing about this chart is that it shows that charts are out of date almost immediately after they're published. They're still useful though, and but the reason that you have to I wanted to tell you about this is when you're looking at charts, when you're looking at comparisons, remember that a lot of the data is can be old, and it's helpful in theory. It may not be completely 100% accurate. This chart is a really, really good example. For instance, when this chart was published, it was accurate. At the time, though, DSL, a type of networking technology, and cable, another type of networking technology, maxed out at about 6 megabits a second. You can get up to gigabit speeds with different technologies now. So these limitations that we have here that were shown at this time actually no longer exist. However, it's really interesting, I think, to go back in time to look at what comparisons look like at that point. We have different types of cabling in our networks, and this is something that I think you'll find very, very interesting. If you've never looked at an Ethernet cable, and an Ethernet cable, we have examples in our slides that you can look at, pictures of the Ethernet cables. They come in different categories, so that's what CAT stands for. It's a shortening of the word category. This chart is accurate as of today. After today, your mileage may vary. Actually, this is a little bit more formal, because these are definitions of the capacity of a cable to perform over 100 meters. In other words, how fast will this cable be in terms of the bandwidth of the cable in a length of 100 meters. You might ask, what's the big deal about 100 meters, which is just over 300 feet? This is a specification that's very useful when we're building buildings, and we want to make sure that we have network coverage in a good place. So imagine a very large building. Let's say that it's a 200-meter building. Which is let's say it's a 200-meter building that's very long and very narrow. We want to make sure that we place our central wiring location in a central place, so that we never exceed the length or the capacity of at 100 meters for the cables that we're running. So that's one of the reasons. Now, in most of our cases, we can place our wiring locations well within that 100-meter limitation, but we also want to know what performance can we expect. When you look at your cable, actually, it's printed. The speed of the cable is printed on there, so you'll see something that says Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6, or Cat6a, which are the different speeds or different capabilities of Ethernet cable. I encourage you to do that in your own library. Take a look at the wiring that you have, especially the wiring that connects to other parts of your building, and know what category it is. Just read and see what it is. If you have any Cat3 cable, you need to get rid of it now. I'm imagining if you have Cat3 cable, you're also having a lot of problems with your network. Some installers have been known to, and this was early days, not recently, thank goodness, but in early days they would use telephone cable, which is what Category 3 cable is. It's for analog telephone signals, and use that to install a data network. So if you have Cat3, you really need to get rid of that. At minimum, your library should have Cat5 cable. The other thing when it comes to cabling is if there's nothing printed on your cabling, that's bad. Every bona fide, every legitimate provider of cabling will print the actual specification on the cable. That's just what they do. So if you don't have that printed on there, and if you're having network problems, I would encourage you to replace that cabling. You really, it's a weak point. You don't want to have a mystery in your wire. There's nothing worse than mysterious things happening. This next chart is really just for your own review to show, again, as of today, being October, when we're recording this, October of 2015, this is showing the different relative speeds of different sorts of technologies, not just networking technologies, but also things inside the computer. So when you see that SCSI, that stands for Small Computer Interface. I've called it SCSI for years, and I've forgotten. So this is your opportunity to look up the actual acronym, what SCSI means. But it's a way hard disks typically communicate with computers. In some computers, there's many different technologies these days for that. But this shows the different relative speeds, just for you to refer back to if you love charts. You can enjoy that. Same thing with our comparison of wireless speeds. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about wireless soon, but as we go through different letters and generations of wireless, the Wi-Fi speeds also increase, which is kind of cool. You might wonder what the G stands for in your cell phone. Most of us do have cell phones, and in rural areas we have both 3G and 4G networks. G just stands for generation. In cell networks, it's actually equipment that's placed in towers or high locations all over the place, all over the country. So to create the cell network, these physical things have to be installed. So when there's new and faster technology, the old stuff is taken out, new stuff is put in all over the place. That's why it takes so long for different generations of cell wireless to get to you in a rural area, because you're not the first people that the cell companies are thinking of, and you know this already. It's a bummer, and I hate that, but they economically, what they need to do is they go actually first to the NFL cities. That's one of the ways that they approach it, and they're the first ones that get upgraded, and then the rest of us get upgraded sometime after that. The technology to deliver 4G, for instance, there's two types of technology. There's WiMAX, which was used or is used by AT&T. There's LTE, which is used by Verizon. LTE stands for long-term evolution. These are just marketing terms for different flavors of high-speed fourth-generation wireless. So, like LTE, long-term evolution sounds like awesome, like it's never going to need to be replaced, right? It's a marketing term. We will have different technologies coming to connect us in the future, but right now, 4G is the top, and there's just a couple of different ways to deliver that. So you might wonder how much bandwidth you need. Earlier I said there's a couple of different factors you should consider: what's available in your area and what can you afford. But in general, I want you to think about this image of more. This is what we need in our libraries. Whatever you have today, you will likely need more of tomorrow in terms of your capacity and your bandwidth. So sometimes we buy a circuit and we think, great, we bought our internet, we're cool, we don't have to think about it anymore. I don't want you to think that way. I would like you to consider that this is an area that you will need to revisit periodically and be ready to increase if you have the capability to do that with the infrastructure that's available to you and the money that you have available for this. But this is one of those areas that you'll be spending money on as you go forward, because it's so important to public services and robust public services. And that means you need a scalable connection. Scalable is a word that you're going to hear a lot of technologists use, and it means the ability to grow or to shrink based on the situation. The scalability in most of our cases usually means growing. So when we say we want something to be able to scale, that means we want to be able to easily increase it in the future. This goes to the sorts of equipment that we choose, actually. In the old days, in enterprise level installations of Wi-Fi, for instance, we only had a choice of technology that used a controller. So we would have our Wi-Fi access points. These are the antennas, the radios that communicate the Wi-Fi signal or facilitate that Wi-Fi signal. And they would need a special unit, a special box that controlled them so that they all operated kind of in unison. Today we have options to have controller-less Wi-Fi, which is really, really scalable. That means anywhere that we have an Ethernet connection, we can simply plug in a Wi-Fi access point. You might wonder, why would I need more than one? Well, Wi-Fi actually has a limit on the number of clients, the number of connections that it can support before it starts slowing down. We experienced that in our speed test segment, and it's painful. It's very, very painful. We want to make sure that we, especially as Wi-Fi connections have the potential to increase, that we have systems that are able to instantly be upgraded without lots and lots of expense or pain, basically. So this is just something to think about in terms of our choices. Just want to make sure you know what an internet service provider is, because it's so essential and so basic to our needs. An internet service provider is just the company or entity that helps connect you to the internet. There's a number of different companies. You can see different logos here of companies that you're probably familiar with, but it can also be your city government, it can be county government, it can be a school, a district. There's lots of different ways to connect, but everyone needs an ISP or an internet service provider. So much depends on this essential connection to the internet. There's different types of ways, too, that internet connections are made available, and what we found in traveling around Texas is that most people have actually a pretty good idea of what they're using. Other people didn't know there was anything other than what they were using, just because there wasn't anything else available. They come in so many different formats. Again, we have different connections to municipal or cities or school governments. A lot of times these are fiber optic connections using fiber optic cable. But we also have things that come from the telephone company. DSL, digital subscriber line, is an example of one of those. Cable, we used to think of them as the cable TV company, but they're just as robust in terms of internet connectivity these days. There's also different types of wireless. We have Wi-Fi connections actually from ISPs, but there's also shortwave and different technologies used to transmit data signals wirelessly. And of course, satellite. And many people in rural Texas are familiar with the satellite type of connection.